All right, everybody. So today we're going to do something a little bit different. I've got a really good friend with me here, Inspector, that I actually got the honor of hiking pretty much every section with of the PCT besides Oregon, I believe. And I still met you at Timberline Lodge. So
Yep.
yeah, this topic today is interesting because I see about it online. I see these tiny little snippets, but it's almost like something people don't want to discuss, or they sit in one camp or the other. And Inspector here is kind of the perfect guest to talk about this because not only has he done both trails, but he did them back to back. So I guess just like tell everybody like a little bit about yourself. What got you into through hiking? Like you're gonna get a triple crown before you're 25 probably, and that's crazy, man. So and I saw you on like firsthand on the trail. Like you pushed miles, you completed the PCT probably faster than I don't know. I want to say 80 to 90% of the class out there. And honestly, just getting every step is impressive enough. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just love to hear your story.
Yeah. So last summer I graduated college, and 2 days later I hopped on the AT. I got kind of introduced to the idea of through hiking from a coworker when I worked in Baxter State Park in Maine for a summertime, and that all kind of came from my first job in high school was working at a grocery store, and I did it for 3, maybe 4 years, in between college and getting home for summer semesters and stuff. And I quickly realized through that I don't want to work indoors, and I need to be outside to enjoy what I'm doing. So trail work was the first job that I really got into, and I met this guy. His trail name's Pistol. And he did the AT in 2019, and we hiked a bunch on our off days while we were up in Maine, and he was like, "Dude, you should just do the AT." And the perfect opportunity arose when I finished up in college, and I got that through hiking bug. Getting out there and getting on the trail was amazing. And when I finished, you kind of get this feeling when you're done on a through hike where you're ready to be home, you're tired, met physically, a little bit mentally. And I got home, and the first day after I got home, I was pacing around my house like I need to be doing something. And it was restless, and it kind of sucked for a bit. The post trail depression really hits. So I did like a short little through hike, and I'm from New York State. And there's the Northville Placid Trail, which is a 140-mile long trail that kind of goes south to north or north to south, depending on which way you do it. And it was a good like little decompress. But after I got home, I realized I need to go out and do the PCT. It seemed like the natural next step, and I did the same thing that I did with the PCT that I did with the AT. I bought my plane ticket well in advance, so in January, and with that, the historic snow year came, and I just sat there and
Well,
watched as more and more and more snow just dumped down, and it was this whole thing. But I wouldn't trade my experience I had this year on the trail for anything. It was a remarkable time, and I'm very glad that I was able to actually hike every little bit of the trail along the way, even though it might have been pieced together a little weird. But
yeah. And, I got to say, like, your plan to go Sobo, I think, saved our hike because fires and snow and just how it
yeah,
worked so perfectly. So, we always credit you, me and Weatherman, to being like the mastermind behind like this scheme that got us to do 2650, which was incredible. But I guess like the first topic that I wanted to touch on was just as a person who has done both these trails back to back pretty recently, like what would you say really, really differentiates them from one another? Like if people were looking to find the trail for them and they can only do one, like what would you say really makes the PCT separated from the AT and vice versa?
well, I'd say a big thing, and you'll see it through anyone's pictures as they document their time along the trail, is you have a lot more of these astounding views and incredible things like the High Sierra, the North Cascades, even the Central Cascades going through the volcanoes in Oregon, and you got the desert sections as well. And the AT, you have a little bit, definitely a lot less views along the way. They call it the Green Tunnel for a reason. Um, but the way I felt on the AT, and I'm from the East Coast, so these things are I've hiked in these mountains and areas for years and years, all my life. I feel like you're working hard for your views, so you kind of cherish them a little bit more. And especially being from the Northeast, I've called the Whites and the mountains in Maine and New York. I've called them home for my whole, experience getting into hiking and everything. So they kind of have this unique beauty to them it's very different from the mountains out west. And eventually I'll get to the Rockies and such too, but uh yeah, like it's very different. And I think physically the Appalachian Trail is harder. The elevation gain and loss, just frankly, it can't be matched. The actual quality of the terrain, like there's a lot more power steps and scrambling and such compared to sections of the PCT.
I mean, you
But
literally climb like ladders on parts of the AT,
yeah,
right? Like
absolutely.
crazy.
There's this one section in Maine where someone just dropped a metal ladder because there was just a cliff that you had to, get
Yeah,
around. So they just
that's
put a
insane.
metal ladder there. It was wild. But and you'll have like rebar like in these cliff faces that you have to use to get up. And some sections, if it's raining, it is super dangerous. And there's plenty of stream crossings on the AT too in Maine where there's no bridges at all, and you got to be really careful. But on the other hand, I thought the PCT was significantly more mentally challenging. Just between, longer food carries, variability in weather, and really the the whole snow year thing and
Yeah.
having to flip around because, you know, Outlaw and I here we hiked together through all the flips essentially, aside from the last one, and we basically went from Cottonwood Pass up to Chester, hiked from Chester to Dunsmuir, flipped up to Canada, hiked all the way back to Dunsmuir, flipped from Dunsmuir back to Chester, and I really personally thought that breaking up the hike like that, it was tough,
Yeah.
especially for the big flips like the Cottonwood Pass to Chester and the Chester to Canada. Those were 4 whole days that we spent not hiking and just kind of in limbo, whether it was still, traveling and stuff, but it was hard. And I mean, realistically, unless you're starting at an ungodly late or early section with the AT, you don't really need to flip flop.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because I just imagine, with the East, you just don't hear. I mean, I'm sure there's wildfires, but you don't hear as much about the actual trail being impacted by these unfortunate events that just kind of make the PCT what it is now. Like you
exactly, yeah,
pretty much know if you've done any research on the PCT, it's going to catch on fire.
yeah,
And you don't know where and you don't know when, and you don't necessarily even know if it's going to impact the trail, but you're going to have to probably either breathe some smoke or like I just felt bad for the people that were hiking Washington and they just didn't even get the same experience as us. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like their
yeah.
views were just smoke and hazy and they could still hike, but imagine climbing in that, you know what I mean? Just trying to snuff for
It'd be
air.
tough.
It's terrible. So yeah, I think you're definitely right there. I mean, I'm not going to speak on the AT, but it just seems like the PCT gives you all these challenges that you just can't really account for. Um, but I guess like another interesting topic that I've always wanted to get your viewpoint on too is, I always joked around with you, right? The AT cult, because it's just everyone who hikes the AT absolutely loves that trail so much. And I get it. There's history and you're very proud of your first through hike. Like the PCT is always going to be somewhat special in my heart. And not to say if I didn't hike the AT, it wouldn't either, but I think just your first one, you're significantly more biased towards. So what do you think makes people sit in a tribe or have this tribalism in the community where I would meet people and they would just completely dissuade me from hiking the AT, where hiking with you opened up my mind to like, this isn't just the green tunnel. Like there's culture, there's history, there's all these things that make the AT special and what it is. And I got done with the trail and I wanted to hike the AT even more than honestly I ever wanted to starting the PCT. So just what do you think makes people sit in these camps of like just tribalism and like go back and forth about which trail's better and why it's better?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to where someone's raised, honestly, and like where they're kind of call it home, whether or not. Like for me, for instance, I'm from the East Coast. The AT has been in my life for 3 years now. I kind of messed around with it a little bit before. I went out last summer. Um, but I mean, even if it's you're not a local, like let's say you're some dude from Illinois or something, and you
Yeah,
go
you're
out
kind
and
of
do
like
the
right in the
AT.
middle. You're not
Yeah, yeah,
west, you're not east.
yeah. And like let's say you go out and do the AT, and then you go out to do the PCT or something. That Appalachian Trail, if you do the whole thing, or if you do it in sections or whatnot, you're gonna have that feeling, or I guess association of the trail with home. It's hard to spend 4, 5, 6 months doing one thing and hiking a trail and being on a trail and not have it, have a real emotional connection for you. So I think a big part of it really is, what your first experience is, and you might tie yourself to it. You kind of see it in like ski culture too. Like,
For sure.
East Coasters like me who have only ever skied out on the East Coast. I'm always going to say I love skiing out here, but I haven't gone out west and skied just yet
Man, we gotta
to,
get you out here, man.
yeah.
Get you out here.
But I think it's a kind of similar concept.
For sure.
But what's been great for me is to be able to have both experience and see, you know, some of the things that the PCT may be lacking, the AT has, or vice versa. Um, like, yeah, they're just different trails. I wouldn't compare them and say like, oh, AT's way better than PCT. Like the AT has shelters every 12, 10, sometimes 5 miles that you can sit in. But it also rains, like it could rain any single day, no matter what. My whole PCT hike that took me 4 months and change, I think it maybe rained 8 days, 10 days at the
Yeah, I'd
very
say like
most.
10 at the very most.
Yeah. So like there's no need for that kind of stuff. But with having all those shelters, you're frequently camping with people all the time, and it's easier to kind of develop a trail family or meet people. But what makes the PCT so special, on the other hand, with that, for instance, is there's people are camping in significantly more spread out areas, basically once you leave the desert. So when you actually link up with people and get to know them and hike with them, it really makes those connections a lot more special. Like I guess from my experience with the AT and the PCT, the people that I've met on the PCT, I've had much more contact with, given it's been a short amount of time. But um, a lot of the people that I met on the AT, I haven't really talked with at all. But yeah,
Yeah. I feel like sometimes too on the PCT, maybe you get in these more remote areas and you just like when we were in the Northern Cascades, we saw the same people for I don't know, like that 150-mile stretch, like in the Glacier Peak Wilderness and
yeah,
and you just got to know them because that's the only people you were seeing for, I don't know, 5, 8, 10 days. And I felt like we didn't get through like halfway through Washington, we started to see more people, but it just maybe it being more remote and you running into the
yep,
same people, you just kind of have the same connection. Cause I felt like I ran into the same maybe 400 people total. Like if I had to just throw a number out of there and the people that I recognized as I was going southbound and they were going northbound and they
yeah,
were flipping and they were doing some crazy plan. I feel like I saw the same people over and over and but like very spread out and just very more remote besides the desert. Like I remember the desert was almost annoying with trying to camp and this was probably a lower year, but yeah, I feel like you would get in touch with people more, and I think it'd be interesting to do the AT to see like the different social aspect there.
yeah,
Just because there's so many more people, I'd imagine that you might meet more people, but might not stay as in contact with as many. So
yeah. And that happened with me too, because I had a super late start date. So I was passing a lot of people, just because of the kind of schedule I was on. And it was tough because I wasn't really meeting up with people who were going similar mileage or anything. But it was really cool to actually be able to meet a whole new group of people every day or every night at camp. and just hearing all of their stories and what they've experienced so far, or where they're from, and all that. And that's how I met my friend Toga. She's out from Texas, and she's done the PCT, the CET, the AZT, most of the AT, and she was the one who really, uh, I guess, kind of made it a possibility in my mind to do the PCT. And she was a treasure trove of advice. And before the snow year even started, she had told me, listen, if you want to actually get most of the trail done, you're going to want to skip the Sierra and get Washington and Oregon before they catch on fire. And she was damn
Solid
right
advice.
about that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, even if you're not, like you and I, we hiked together for what, almost 1,000 miles or
At
maybe more.
least, yeah, maybe like,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
1100, 1200, something like that.
but yeah, and I hiked with Toga and saw Toga probably for about 800, but it was more on and off rather than together. But those connections still are possible, and you still get just as good a bond, at least in that case.
Yeah, and I'd imagine, yeah, maybe, I think it's a long trail. Anything can happen. And I would almost dare to say that I guess with the AT, you probably have just more social events and more I feel
Yeah,
like there's like actual events that happen on trail that aren't trail days. Like I've seen people go to like these types of concerts and like crazy parties in the woods, and like that's cool to me. I think there's a reason why people feel so strongly
yeah.
connected with that trail, right? Um, okay, so this is kind of an interesting question. Part one, if how did you feel going in? So when I was driving home today, I was thinking about this and I was like, if I walk to a different terminus right now, or I walk through the arches at Springer Mountain, or if I walk to whatever terminus and I was starting a through hike today, like how much different would it feel? So I guess like how much different did it feel when you started your second through hike versus your first one? And how much different did it feel after it was done than your first one?
So it was definitely starting. It was very different for me. On Even though I started the AT down in Georgia, which is very far from where I live, it was only about I think 4 hour, not even 4 hour, a couple hour flight, if that. And then, an hour shuttle ride to Springer Mountain. And it while it was a flight and all this travel, it still felt close to home. I was
Yeah,
hiking to home. I was always getting closer and closer to family and everything. But with the PCT, I was on the complete opposite end of the country. So starting out there and starting alone, like I hadn't organized, meeting with anybody or trying to find any people with similar start dates. I just figured, hey, I'll wing it as I get out here. And so yeah, camping down at Cleef on the border, it felt not lonely per se, because there's a lot of people down there,
yeah,
but it really felt I'm I'm a rookie out here. I had no experience desert hiking. I had really the only time I've been out west is on a family road trip when I was 7. So I had no idea of what to expect in a kind of a more fine scale. Like in the overall, I had a better idea, but um, yeah, it was tough in that aspect, at least starting. But through it all, I think the ending of the PCT was really it was overwhelming and underwhelming at the same time, I would say, because getting up all these passes as they kept going, and most days I did a double pass day. So having these, unbelievable climbs and getting these crazy views on these passes and being, you're in radio silence at this point too. There's no cell service until you get to Whitney once you're down a little bit of ways from Vermilion Valley Resort. So you're cut off, but uh, it was, you just get these amazing views. You descend to these beautiful valleys and kind of do it all over again. And it kind of culminates with your Whitney summit for me at least. Um, and getting up to Whitney, it was just like that was the moment where I finished the trail in my mind. Um,
for sure.
because like that's it. Like, it's the highest mountain in the lower 48. Uh, you just get to look out on everything, and it was words can't really describe it. Um, but then after that, I had to hike down and in a hailstorm and pack up my gear, and after that, it was an extra 20 miles down to Cottonwood Pass and getting out of there. But getting down to there at that point, it was just got to get home and work my way down to LA to fly out. But when I finished the AT, on the other hand, first through hike, finishes on Mount Katahdin. And, having a terminus on one of the most insane mountains that I'll ever hike, which even after being out west, I'll still hold that firm. Uh, because it's really like, completely surrounded in just flat land, and you have this old, like, West Coast-esque mountain in the middle of nowhere, and it just stands out like a giant, and that's where your trail finishes. So, that trail for me, finishing it and having it be the first through hike, it was really just like it really hit. Um,
Yeah.
and I think with this trail doing all the flipping and finishing back at Mulkey, Cottonwood Pass, it that's where the underwhelming part kind of was,
Yeah.
because it wasn't this grandiose terminus. It was just this is where I was before. And it was cool to walk down to the meadow and see this creek that was covered in snow when you were there months ago. But um, in a perfect world, if I could have finished up at the northern terminus in Canada, it would have been great. But at the same time, having that Whitney moment and sharing it with some JMTers, or there was this one I think day hiker that we had a bit of a language barrier, but like we helped each other like get pictures of you know and everything, and yeah, it's tough. It's hard to describe even 2 weeks out. Um, but at the same time, I'm already looking forward to the next one.
Yeah. And I I share your sentiment. I think Mulkey was everything for me just because it was my first one, and it was just so crazy, man. Like when I walked up to it, I saw all of us like under the tree,
Yeah.
in the snow, like in the tree well, and I saw that scene as I was walking up like a few hundred feet away, and I lost it, and but yeah, I agree with you. It wasn't a romantic ending to the PCT. We didn't run to the terminus, and it was
Yeah.
funny 'cause we touched the terminus at like 1,000 miles, but I'm just grateful we touched it.
Yep.
I'm grateful that we got that. And yeah, I guess so. Talk a little bit about like post trail depression. Do you think you were more ready for it this time, or do you think it kind of still hit you in the exact same way it did the first time?
I'd say this time it was a lot more delayed. My first time with the AT, I had summited Katahdin. My parents had drove up to pick me up because it was only 10 hours away. Um, so that was cool. But
Further than
then,
like 36 hours or whatever
yeah,
it
that's
was.
right. So I mean, I was home the next day, and it definitely was this feeling of like feeling lost, and you know, it's it's tough. It does hit you pretty hard. But this with the PCT, which was a little different, is I finished the trail. I stayed in Lone Pine. I then got a hitch down to Tehachapi. Stayed with some wonderful trail angels in Tehachapi, Cheryl and Ted, the best.
Yeah, the
Um,
best.
Stayed with them, and then I got a Greyhound connection down to LA, stayed in LA for a night, flew back home with, like a layover in Detroit, all this travel. So it didn't really hit me at that point because it was, you're kind of, at least for me when I travel, I get not anxious, but I'm kind of locked in on like I need to do this to get here, and I need to make this deadline. So you're kind of still in that trail mindset in a way where you're trying to get to places at times and everything. But then after I got home, man, the first week hit me like a bus. Like I was just laying in bed. I couldn't do much. I definitely had like a cold or something because I like my body was sore, and I had no motivation to do anything. I think this time it was significantly harder than getting back from the AT. But I partially blame myself a little bit too because I didn't try to get myself out there.
Mhm.
Like with the AT, I went and did that other trail. I didn't even try to do anything this time, but it's tough. I mean, this is really the first time I've talked with someone extensively about the trail too. So I think being able to have that kind of kind of verbal walkthrough with how you're doing, but also just how the trail was. So I think, reminiscing about the trail and thinking about the highs, the lows, everything in between, it helps a lot just to reflect and kind of look through and dig through your mental filing cabinet of everything rather than just kind of, looking through pictures on your phone at 2 a.m. and being sad. But but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, and that's why, I'm always gonna make an effort to stay in contact with y'all. I mean, we shared something that you just you feel like the rest of the world doesn't quite grasp. I know people watching this channel, I know they are more in tune, they backpack, they do their thing, they've section hike, but just for the general public, like some of my friends literally think I walked a highway from Mexico to Canada, or they think that, I mean, Ty came out on the trail
yep,
with me, aka Turtle. He was at dinner the other night with two of my friends, and one of my friends was trying to explain to another on what I was doing and what was happening. And Ty was just like, "That's not right at all, man. Like I literally hiked with this guy for 3 days, and that's not what happens at all." And, people don't understand that you resupply. So, um, yeah, you can feel very lonely. You can feel very isolated in the sense that like you walk people through this stuff, you tell them about it. So many people in your life that care about you want to know about what your experience was, but you just can't tell them. I mean, you can tell them I walked, it was hard, I climbed, it was hard to breathe, the elevation, and all of those things can be conceptualized really well, but you can't tell them how you felt when you crossed over the bridge of the gods. You can't tell them what it feels like to get on top of Forester and scramble up these rocks and snow. And you
yep,
can't tell them what it feels like to reach 500 milestone, 2000 milestone, the mental battle of like just trying to stay on this trail and trying to stay motivated and focused and present. I think it can be lonely in that sense. So like that's why I figured like let's have this conversation. I think it's a topic that people like you see YouTube shorts on and they're like, "Oh, the AT and the PCT and one super scenic and one is kind of more social." And it's just this surface level. So I was just curious to get your perspective on someone who's like literally gone back to back
yeah.
and just be like, "Hey, like what is what?" And I think from what you've said and what I've gathered over hiking with you is they're both amazing trails. They're both life-changing experiences. They'll both show you the wilderness that you never thought, in a way you could see it. And you'll forge lifelong friendships. And I think it doesn't matter if you're a West Coast guy, if you're an East Coast guy, all comes down to preference. But I know that I'm stoked to do the AT and I will do it one day. But yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on. And then I guess the last final question and try and like, use some abstract thinking here. But if you had to throw one, the AT or the PCT, you had to do one again. And it's been like a year since you've done the PCT. So don't, don't come into the preconception of you just did the PCT. Which one
Yeah.
would you choose to do?
It would definitely depend on certain circumstances, of course. But let's
Good
say,
weather year on the PCT. Don't worry about weather conditions and
okay,
hours. The trail is the trail. Yeah.
I still, I think I would do the AT again over the PCT, only because um, the highs in the PCT are significantly higher than a lot of the highs on the AT, for instance. But I think the low points of the trail, like for me, certain parts of the desert were really low points. The burn areas between basically Old Station all the way down to past Quincy, close to Sierra City. Those were just so hard for me. It was hard to enjoy the trail. It was hot. It was low water. There wasn't a lot of people I was seeing. I was going like maybe a person a day, if that, in a lot of those areas. Um, and yeah, I think for me, like as a entirety of a trail, the AT was a lot more enjoyable in that regard, and it's closer to home. But that's not to say that there are many sections on the PCT that are much higher on my list of I want to get back out there and do them, whether it's the Sierra or the North Cascades.
Yeah.
Um,
Better for
I
section
like,
height, I feel like.
yes, that's what I would say, 100%. I would much rather, if I were to hike the entire PCT again, it would most likely be a section hike, like doing it section by section. If I were to hike the AT again, I could absolutely see myself doing it as an entire
Doing
through.
doing the entire
So,
thing. Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Well, dude, I appreciate it, man. Whether or not I see you on the CDT next year.
You better.
Um, but yeah, dude, it's gonna be awesome to watch you Triple Crown regardless. It was awesome hiking with you. And man, appreciate you coming on and doing this, man.
Yeah, of course, man. Can't wait to see that face without that beard. It's gonna look really weird.
Dude, it's gonna be weird, man. It's gonna be weird, but it's time to go. It's time to get back into society and reintegrate. So
Yeah, just
you
for
have
a
to do what
bit though.
you gotta do. Yeah. But yeah, regardless, I gotta get you out to Colorado to snowboard or something, man. You gotta
Oh yeah.
honestly, if you ever want to do the Colorado Trail, I would totally rehike that trail. I would.
Dude, I'll be doing it most of it next
I
summer,
know
so
you will be doing like 300, like all the good parts, essentially the best parts. So worst case scenario, I'll get out there in section Colorado with you.
I'm holding you
Be
to it.
really slow, but I'll push myself and just die like Ty did for me. So, but yeah, homie, good to talk to you. Stay in touch.
Yeah, of
Honestly,
course.
hit me up if you're ever like wanting to talk trail or like just connect with someone because in the same sense, I felt the same as you. Like
Yeah.
I've been off for a week, but yeah, it's weird and it's hard and it's the trail goes from 0 to 100 and then it just goes from 100 to 0 and it just
Yeah.
happens instantly. And that's like I think what makes through hiking, that's the one downside about through hiking, is just trying to realize that there is a real society, and you do have to somewhat join it again, not for as long as you want or you can dip out whenever, but you do have to go back. So
Yeah.
it was an honor hiking with you, man. Thanks for coming on, and I'll talk to you soon, homie.
Yeah, of course, man. You too. Anytime.
All right, brother.